Alright, we're going to make a simple little jQuery application. The idea of using, I don't know, what's kind of under this umbrella of HTML5. We're not using any HTML5 specific things, but creating an interactive web page using HTML, CSS, jQuery, and other things. Just keep in mind that it's kind of a collaborative thing. They all work together, unlike Flash, which is one centralized package. So it makes it a little bit more difficult to kind of wrangle all those things. We also have cross-browser issues to deal with, so we need to make sure that they work on each browser. It's another thing that we really don't have to worry about in Flash. But the positives are that we can use those on mobile devices and things like that don't support Flash. So it's a little bit more broader. So that's the good thing, and the reason why we're starting to shift in that direction. So it all starts with an HTML page. If we look here, just got a simple HTML page. I've got a nav up at the top here, a little content box, which you can't see currently. It's being hidden by that nav. I've got my CSS pages linked up here. As you can see, I've got multiple CSS pages, one for just my navigation bar, one for general tags, body tags, H tags, P tags, LIUL, things like that, general tag, then global elements like things that I think would be on every site or every page. I've got a CSS link just to a external Google CSS page for a typeface that I'm using in the CSS. So you don't have to. You can have one big CSS page if you'd like. I think it's a little bit more manageable having it in separate chunks for organizational purposes, but that's up to you. Just note that you can link to multiple CSS pages. It works exactly the same way. So we're going to use jQuery to create the interactivity on this page. So the first thing I need to do is link to the jQuery library. So to link to jQuery, you can either download the package from jQuery's website and make sure it's the most recent one, or you can just connect to it externally as it's hosted on Google. That's my preferred method. That way I don't have to worry about files and things like that. Just externally connect to this via an absolute path to that. So how you do that is you just need to copy this address here. So there's the library. Go to Dreamweaver. You can type, or you can just type the tag in. Either way. Right here, there's an insert script button. That's pretty handy. And then I typed my bit in here. No problem. We'll say OK. Okay, so I'm linked up to that. It's pretty easy. All right, now we could just begin to type the jQuery here in a script tag. I would prefer, my preference is to type them externally. It's very similar to the ActionScript class system. It's easier to organize, and of course it's always best to externalize those things if you can. So I'm just going to make a new file. JavaScript. It's just a simple text file. And I want to save that in my root directory here. I'm going to make a new folder and call this JS for JavaScript. And I'm just going to name this DC for document class. That comes from ActionScript, my ActionScript background. But this is my general master control script. So I'll save that. Back to my index, and then I'm going to insert another script tag here and just link to my DC, so JS/DC. Okay, so now I've externally linked to that. So let's test. Let's make sure we're linked to our JavaScript library. Make sure that our external JavaScript files is correctly linked. So with jQuery, it always starts with this function. Right now, Dreamweaver allows me to toggle between pages that are linked to this. Just be mindful that I'm just typing right in that external file. This is just a shortcut to that file. Allows me to continue to look at the site while I'm doing that, which is pretty handy. So I'm just going to put an alert somewhere to that trace. Always do that. If this doesn't work, then you know it's never going to work. So let's save and test. Firefox is my preferred browser for testing. Okay, so I've got this box that says working, so I know everything's connected right, connected to my library. So that's half the battle right there. So this alert is okay, but it's kind of obtrusive, and it will only give you one piece of information at a time. So what I was really looking for, or what I think we need, is something like the trace method in ActionScript. So I found a plugin called jQuery Debug. So download this and then link to the plugin on your HTML. And you can do that from wellstyle.com. This one's pretty easy to use. And once established, now you've got a trace. So I'll show you how it works, but go ahead and download that. So I've downloaded it, and what I might do is have another folder in your JS folder for plugins, because this can get pretty unruly as well. Given that we've got this kind of collaborative effort between HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, organization is key to just operate efficiently and understand what's going on. So just take a few minutes to save time, save a ton of time. So all your plugins you might want to create a folder for all your plugins. So there's jQuery Debug. So back to my HTML. This is kind of how you connect your different plugins and things like that. A typical error: students will go to the example, and then the example, of course, has a link to the jQuery library, and they'll link to the jQuery library again. So they'll have two links to that, and that'll cause some problems occasionally. So you only need to link to that one thing once the jQuery library is established. So here's my script button, and you could type in the link. It's just a tag. I just like to use Dreamweaver to do that. So there's my link to that debug. Let's go ahead and put it above my DS link. Let's see if I can get that. Find if I order them a certain way, they'll help me keep track of things. So the library, here's my plugin, and then there's my master of my DC. So this is how it works. I'm in my DC here. And you create, this is documented on the page you downloaded it from. You create a little debug var. It just creates an object that handles the debugging. And then the syntax is, I believe, debug dump. And then we'll put that word in there, working. It's coming out alert. So create the little var. You only have to do this once, and then all throughout the code you can just say debug dump, and it'll dump what you want here. So let's test that. Alright, so there's my trace box here. So that'll show up, giving me information without that annoying alert box. And it'll do multiple things. If I say trace a var or dump a var, it'll dump it right in there and not interfere with the process. First thing I want to do is to lock this navbar to the bottom of the page and be rescaled according to the width of the window. So with jQuery, we can attach. We can go and select any object on the stage, including the window. So let's go ahead and do that. So add that in my. So we're saying select the window, and then on resize. So this is just like adding an event listener in ActionScript, and we're just listening for the window to be resized. So when it gets resized, we want this nav to be locked on the bottom, etc. So I'm going to go ahead and just do my debug dump here, just as a test to make sure that's working. And let's go ahead and trace the window's width. And if you use Dreamweaver, it'll pop up the properties just like in Flash. So that's a handy thing. Looks like I typed that in wrong with no parentheses. So on reload there, just saying function, function, function. Alright, so on resize, yeah, it's giving us the number. So I typed it right the first time. Window width. So this will give us the width of the window. jQuery is a little bit quirky. It's ultimately handy, but in ActionScript we just type the name of the object. We just say window dot. In JavaScript you have to go ahead and actually select it, go find it, and that's where this number sign, the money sign window. So if you actually want to grab an object, you have to specify inside this little method here. It says go and get the window, and then on resize attach this listener to it, and then on resize we'll get this information. So to lock that nav down to the bottom, I created a little function here, and you can write that outside of this document ready function, because we're gonna call it in here. So just like ActionScript, we say function. We create the function there, same syntax, and then I'm getting some information. The window height. Select the window, and then give me the height of it. Select the window. Give me the width of it. I need the width of the the height of the nav. So I set up create a little variable for that. Went out and got the number sign nav, which is the name of this div tag, or the name of the ID attribute on that div tag. And I'm using outer height. Outer height, when you're using CSS and you add a margin or padding to an object, it adds to the width. So let's say it's 50 pixels tall, and I put padding, 20 pixels padding on the top and bottom. The thing is 50 pixels tall, but then it also adds the 20 and the 20. So it's 50, 60, 70, 80, 90 pixels actually, but the height will only read 50. So if you get outer height, it'll incorporate margin and padding added to that. And so that's why I had to use the outer height method. Width, grab the nav, give me the width. So using those, I'm using jQuery's CSS method to adjust the CSS. So the top is essentially the Y value of that div, and then of course I'm adjusting the width to stretch it out according to the window's width. So a little calculation here, give me the window height, so it locks it to the bottom, and then subtract its own height so it brings it back up. And I've got it in a function, and I want that function to happen every time I resize the window, so I'm going to put that in my resize. Alright, so nothing happened because I haven't resized yet, so I'm going to resize it, and it locks it to the bottom, and as it grows as well. I'm thinking that width is a little superfluous because it's set to 100%, so maybe if I take that off it might still work. Let's see. Yeah, it still works. The CSS property that's attached to this is width 100%, so I didn't even need to calculate that width. All right, but the logic is still sound there. If I want that to happen without resizing, I just need to call that function again. So let's go ahead and call that on document ready. Just go ahead and set the nav position, and it does it automatically. So now I'm set. All right, now I want to make this act like an application by loading some information. So currently these are just A tags, and I'm just hyperlinking to 3 pages that are just simple HTML pages with my content, animation, DOM, and loading. Okay, but I want those to be externally loaded into this area, and I've called this shell. So how do you do something like that? Pretty simple in jQuery, so that's a pretty cool feature. So we'll talk about that. I could certainly type all that code in this document ready. My preference is to have a new sheet just to handle this navigation element. That just for organizational purposes. That's really the only reason. Just to keep each area clean and specific to what it's doing. So depends on how you work, but I think that's probably some good advice to take, just to keep things organized. It does require you to remember how it's set up and how they interact, but you probably can handle that. So I'm creating a new text file, calling it nav. Let's go ahead and connect to the HTML here. So just right under my DC.